Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is Navia Reddy here, Dr. Navia. I'm going to be talking today about tips to succeed in college. And my personal experiences, what I wish I had done differently, what I wish I would have done more of. So this is just an introduction. I am an MD physician at this point in time, so it will be directed more towards medicine, but I think you can use these concepts for anything that you want to get into, graduate school, law school. I think these concepts can be applied to whatever you're interested in, but I will talk more specifically on how to get into med school towards the end of this video. Starting off with college, I went to UCLA, and it was a difficult decision. So when I was in high school, I was intimidated, quite honestly, to get into a big college like UCLA. It's one of the biggest UCs. I did contemplate going to smaller colleges because I felt that I would kind of be lost in a big college, and I was intimidated, quite honestly. So I, got into Berkeley, and I wish that I applied to more private schools. I did get into the Claremont schools, which are local private schools. I was already intimidated by UCLA, so I didn't even apply to anything else. And to start off a story, that's something that I do regret, and I think that you should shoot for the moon, and if you fail, you still land against the stars. So just, try. It wouldn't hurt to see where you'll get into. In hindsight, I wish I did apply to a lot of private schools, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, just to see, what my capabilities were, and to not, I guess, underscore myself or just know my full potential. So going back, think about all the colleges that are out there and what's best for you. Don't be afraid because you're just applying. You do not have to go. So going back, just apply broadly is what I would say. But I applied to mostly UC schools, and I originally wanted to go to a smaller UC school. In terms of class sizes, I was told that it would be difficult to find classes, that it would be super competitive, because if we start thinking about schools like UCLA and Berkeley, they do take more competitive applicants, so it's a lot of competition and stress. So that's kind of why I was afraid, but I'm so glad that I didn't let the fear stop me. I went to UCLA. I had the best, I would say, some of the best 4 years of my life. I gained great friendships, people who were like-minded like me, who I still talk to today and have relationships today in medicine. Other reasons why I chose UCLA was that it was associated to Ronald Reagan Hospital, which is one of the biggest hospitals in Los Angeles. And it was located 5 minutes walking distance from an undergrad campus. Unlike other schools that I was looking into, like Berkeley or UC Irvine, which also has a medical center, but this was something that attracted me to UCLA because I wanted to go into medicine. I knew in high school. So that was another point that helped me make my decision. And another point that helped me make my decision is that I'm a homebody. I'm a California girl through and through. And so I said UCLA was for me. I was very scared, honestly. When I did press the acceptance button, I was like, oh my gosh. There wasn't that many people from my school that went to UCs, or in my year, there was no one that went into a private Ivy League college or anything like that. Even though I'm coming from California, there are neighboring schools where, some people go into Ivy Leagues and things like that, but that wasn't my school. And some of the top colleges were Berkeley and UCLA. So I was kind of intimidated and afraid. But once I started in UCLA, all of that went away. I was a physiological sciences major, so I wanted to get as close to medicine as possible, and so that's what I did. And I took it because it offered an anatomy lab in undergrad, which is also very rare. So I think that was helpful for me to kind of know that I wanted to go into medicine early, so I can kind of set the stepping stones. So, but that wasn't the case for everybody, but it just really helped in hindsight. So I was a physiological sciences major. Mostly everybody in that major wanted to become a doctor. So you can see how that kind of changes the curve of things, how things get competitive in terms of helping each other and things like that, and in terms of getting the best classes and early, because everybody was preparing to get into med school in terms of that major. So there are a few other majors that are, medicine compatible. There was neuroscience. That was a popular major. There was MCDB and MING, molecular biology majors. There was psychobio majors. So why did I pick this major that was so difficult, competitive? There's two routes that you can, take to get into medicine. There was, an easier path where you can take a, psychobiology class where not everybody in that major was trying to get into medical school, get a super high GPA and help you stand out when you apply to med schools. Or there's the other route where if you're a neuroscience major, phi-sci major, you were in a class with everybody that wanted to be doctors and wanted to be competitive and get the best grades. And that would take a hit on your GPA because you would be in a pool of people studying harder to try to get into those career paths. So in hindsight, it was very difficult in terms of, curves on exams and, the studying required to be in such competitive majors. But I think it was very helpful because it kind of set up the stage for medical school where it got even more competitive. So I was kind of happy that I slowly eased into that by taking a difficult major. But not to say there are many of my, friends, other people that made it in medicine that did do the biology or psychobiology or psychology path that was that are great doctors that did great in medical school too. So it's up to you. It's kind of, do you want to have that transition be greater in terms of being competitive and things like that in med school and the amount of information you need to know? Or do you think that you would like to enjoy your 4 years with, less stress or less pressure and then, bring it on when you get into med school? So that's kind of the way it went, and not one way is better than the other, definitely. That's the path I chose. So I was that major, and I liked it at the end of the day. I didn't fate in anatomy in med school because I had already seen cadavers in undergrad. So I was kind of primed already for that. And another thing that had helped me in UCLA to try to get the classes that I want, to kind of calm my nerves in such a big place, was finding a great mentor. I know I harped on this in the last video in high school, but it's the same thing goes again for undergraduate schools. I found a great mentor in UCLA during my first year. I remember her name, Ava. She was the biology mentor and counselor for all of the individuals in the biology major. So each major had its own mentor. I would walk by her office in between classes, talk about, my ideas to become, a physician, how to get into med school, and also classes. UCLA was very competitive in getting your classes. Things would fill up right away. There was a tier system where honor students would get first choice in choosing their classes, and that kind of determines how long you'll be an undergrad and if you'll be able to complete the courses before, applying to med school and things like that. So honors is a good way to go. If you're able to do it, you will get, priority in terms of choosing your classes. But another way is, talking to your counselor. She can tell you, how many students usually apply to this class, which ones you should rank first, because it is a tier system. You have to first choose your first class and second class and so on. So she can help you organize that. They've done this, they're experienced, and they're a great source of knowledge, and also somebody to help calm your nerves and help you in other aspects in terms of research or things like that. I would highly recommend finding somebody that you gel with. I was a physiological sciences major, so there was a counselor for that, but I connected with the biology major counselor. So explore, see who you connect with, and run with it. Other things that I would like to talk about during the video is classes themselves and how to get a good GPA. That definitely matters in getting to med school. The things that matter are your GPA and MCAT. Kind of like in high school, the things that matter are your GPA and SAT. So finding how to do well on these courses will, help you down the line. And how do you do well? There's hundreds of people in the class. There's so much study material. So what I would do is, I was the type of student to go to every class physically. There are options where you can do it on the computer. I'm more of a visual person. and I needed to go in person to my courses. So there's different ways. Figure out what way works for you. If saving that time walking to class, getting a seat, and all that is not your thing, then work from home and go with it. So find what works for you. Other things are, if you're not doing well, ask for help. Yes, it is competitive. Everybody wants to get in. Get into grad school, med school, law school. Everyone has their goals and dreams. But if you're not doing well, it's normal. There's classes where I didn't do well and I didn't get things the way I wanted to. But there is help in tutoring. I would go to my classes, and then in the evening times, there was tutoring sessions that I would voluntarily go to. There are, sessions with the teacher. So you can stay after class or before class, ask questions on concepts. Not abnormal that you can't get the topic right away. So that is why there's all of these other methods to kind of drive in the information and get you prepared for the exams. Don't think that it's just going to class and it's all depending on you. There's help out there from your teachers, from your peers, from tutors, etc. Other things that I would like to talk about during this video are extracurriculars. They kind of set you apart, like in high school. The same goes for college. How are you different from the thousands of college students that are going to courses just like you? And that's especially important when you're going to apply again to graduate school, like med school, law school, etc. So this comes from clubs and extracurricular activities. Things that I did in UCLA was Project Rishi, which was an organization to help underserved areas in India to start up sustainable ways in terms of water sourcing, in terms of farming, in terms of health. So to kind of improve these things in third world countries. That's what interested me. So I became the VP of that. Go for it. If it interests you, try to stand out and be consistent. Start early and be there, for meetings and things like that every year. Show that you're dedicated. It's not like I'm going to join, this club this month and this club that month, and the more the merrier. You have to try to really show that you're committed to it. Try to get into the leadership of it. That shows a lot about you, that, people actually saw that you cared. You put in a lot of effort and you're consistent, which is so important in any field that you go into. Other things that I did on the medical aspect, because I did want to go into medicine. Project Rishi had somewhat to do with medicine, but in more particular aspects of medicine, I volunteered in the hospital in Ronald Reagan that I mentioned earlier. What did I do there? I kind of got into the environment. That's step number one. Get into the environment that you want to go into later on. So I got into that environment. I was an observer for hand washing. So it was something so minor as that. I would go around and make sure that, the staff was washing their hands appropriately. And it actually made a difference, because what I told them and counseled them on, the rates of, hospital acquired infections actually decreased. And we were able to do studies about that just by hand washing. Nothing that required tons of money or improvements in such a big hospital, something so simple as that. So it can be simple, but just be consistent and have fun with it. It was a great time to talk to nurses, talk to other doctors while I was observing hand washing about, their journey, and learning from the environment, learning different parts of the hospital in terms of the ICU versus the regular medicine floor and things like that. So I volunteered in that aspect as well. Another thing in terms of getting in to medical school and beyond is research. So in terms of getting into an MD program in the US, things are different for DO programs or international programs or Caribbean programs, but it is highly underscored that you do research. Why? It's another reason that sets you apart from everyone else and shows that you're going to be dedicated into improving the medical field in the future. So I got into research the first year that I was at UCLA. People actually even start research even before that. You can start at any time in high school, even in middle school. But I started it in undergraduate in my first year. And how did I get into it? So I went online, talked to the counselors that I mentioned earlier, found a few projects interviewed. So typically you do interview, show that you are capable. My lab or my research arena was a little bit competitive. They asked for my first quarter grades to start research. So I had to do really well, and I showed them that my report card pretty much, and they said, hey, you're in. It seems like you're a hard worker. You really want this. You're not going to be wasting our time. And I stuck with my research for all 4 years at the same lab. So, and it was a great way to break up the monotony of going to classes and doing well and all of this. It was kind of a home base where I would come and I would, talk to my co-researchers, talk to my PI, which is the principal investigator who helps you develop your projects. It was also a way to travel for me. I was able to present a poster because I worked in the nuclear medicine department, so I worked with the PET scans and Alzheimer's disease. So I was able to go to Texas, actually, in San Antonio as an undergrad to present to my research to radiologists. So I love that aspect, and I will never forget those trips. So these are things that stand out to me and stand out to the people who are going to interview you in the future if you decide to go that route. So those are some of the things that I think are really important. In terms of testing, there's the MCAT, just like there's the SAT in high school. So what is the MCAT? How do you prepare for it? There's so many other things that you already have to do in college. This is another added thing on top of all the courses and trying to get into med school. It is intimidating. It is a lot. So the good thing is a lot of the courses that you do for your medicine major overlap with what you need to know for the MCAT in terms of chemistry, biology, etc. There are people who are English majors who do great on the MCAT on their own or with help from tutoring, etc. And more power to them. I think that's great that they can be well-rounded. For me, I kind of need things to be consistent and repeated over and over for me to get them. So that's why I chose a science major, so that I could easily get the information needed for the MCAT and work on that. So I also went to courses just like I did for the SAT. I went to a Kaplan course for the MCAT. This was difficult. I would go weekly. Maybe I think the courses were pretty late, so like 7 to 9. I was very tired. I would be walking back from campus in the middle of the night, pretty much after the course was done, and I would have classes the next day, tests for my classes the next day. But it was helpful because it kind of gave me a guideline to focus on. So I did do the MCAT during my college days. There is a different route that a lot of people who get into US medical schools go through is taking a year off, because what I said, these are the extra research, the MCAT, doing well on courses, and also that I did not mention interviewing during your college years and taking finals is a lot to do all at the same time. So many people kind of break that up, do well on their GPA, take a year off, in that time do research, prepare for the MCAT, and then do interviews without having to overlap with, undergraduate duties. So that is another method that a lot of people use, and it actually works because they get into great colleges because they put in the extra time and didn't have so much to balance. And I think in hindsight, that would be a great idea if you think that it's overwhelming and things like that, to take some time off after college. There's so many routes to getting into a certain career path. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. It's how you feel. And it's never too late. And there's so many ways to do it. There's not just one way. This is just the basic way that I got to where I am today. So at the end of the day, the interviews is something that we talked about just briefly. Interviews are very important to get into med school in the US. I did not have to interview. So I did apply to DO schools, I did apply to Caribbean schools, and I applied to MD schools. I wanted to be as broad as possible. I did not know where I stood in terms of my grades and things like that. Thankfully, I did get into my choice of med school in the US, but I did apply to DO and Caribbean schools, and I did get into those. But in terms of DO schools, I did not have to interview to get into the DO schools. And they are typically a little bit, in terms of GPA and MCAT scores, a little bit lower in terms of the cutoffs. But I don't think DOs are better than MDs and vice versa. These are just different ways of getting into the medical school field. And in terms of the Caribbean field, I did an interview for that, but it was very informal. We met at a coffee shop and they asked a few questions about why I wanted to go into medicine. It was less than 30 minutes and that was it. Whereas, interviewing to US med schools did take a lot of preparation. There was official days to be scheduled. You had to show up in, interview attire. There was a full day of interviews and questioning in terms of research and your GPA and are you a compassionate person from what they can get in a day. So it was much more intensive that I can say when I compare all the 3 routes to get into med school. So that's the interviewing process, which takes up a lot of time in terms of flying to all these interview slots, coordinating them with your finals in undergrad, and having all completed pretty much all your work in terms of research and extracurriculars, and in terms of showing them that you're dedicated and have completed some projects, etc. So that is my spiel on how to do well in college. Things that I wish I did differently is, go to more of the college events, unifying events like sports games and concerts. I did go to a few and I still remember them. Rihanna was there. I did go to a few sports games, and there's this thing called Spring Sing at UCLA, which is kind of like a play, a musical that was something that me and my friends never missed. So the fact that I remember all these names shows that those are the things that you really remember in college. I can't recall my favorite test or my favorite, class or club meeting and things like that. So that is what you'll remember at the end of the day, is all the relationships that you made and the fun things that you did. So try to maximize those as much as possible. It is a lot to balance, but taking a few hours out of your day to go to those things that mean a lot to your friends and you are totally worth it, because you remember those pretty much for your lifetime. So I hope you found this video very helpful. I'm so glad that I was able to share my experience with you and some tips and tricks. Leave comments if you have any other suggestions for videos or for other viewers on here in terms of getting into med school and doing well in college. But I wish you the best of luck, and see you next time. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe the video.